everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our fantastic faculty members, Brandon Hanson and Geoff Grunland. So thank you both so much for joining us today, and how are you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Callum.
Wonderful. So today we're talking about astronomy for astrologers, and that's something you're going to be teaching at Kepler here very soon. And you put together a fantastic presentation, so let's dive in.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Geoff Grunland, and I am a certified evolutionary astrologer. And I've been teaching astronomy for astrologers for OPA for a few years with Lene Van Horn. And I'm very excited to be teaching the same material, but a little bit different with Brandon Hanson here. And this is my wife and my son and my daughter, and down in Boston, taking my son to college. And this is little old me down there in the bottom middle with my mom and dad and my brother and my sister.
You know what? I love those old school photos.
Back in the good old 70s, indeed.
Absolutely. Your sister's glasses.
Yeah, yeah.
Love them.
All the plaid.
And all the plaid.
Still wearing it here.
Yes, right? Okay, well, my name is Brandon Hanson. I am originally from the Southwest, from Phoenix, Arizona, and I live currently in Los Angeles. I'm actually an aerial acrobat by profession. I've been doing gymnastics since I was 8, and when I was 18, started with aerial silks. And you might not at first make the connection what would aerial have to do with astrology, astronomy, but interestingly, I think learning to navigate my own body through space helped me to understand how other objects spin around.
It's funny because before the recording, I was seeing these photos and I was like, Brandon must have a strong Mars. And you were like, yeah, Mars in Aries, domicile.
Yes, you even said Mars and Aries first. Obviously, a testament to your own astrological prowess. I also am the inventor and designer of a set of celestial displays called the Annuli. Singularly, one is an Annulus. So here I am pictured holding one, and it is a physical model that you can cast a chart upon, and something that I will be using during our course as something to help us visualize the mechanics of the astronomy. So like Callum said, we are going to begin our class March 2nd. It's coming up so fast, and I am really, really excited for the content that Geoff and I created and to be able to share it with this generation of Kepler students.
And those boards are absolutely fantastic. And now I think you've got a patent out for those boards. And is there a place that people can go and find those?
Thank you. The boards are patent pending. It was actually such a fun process to go through trying to describe them in the way that like the legal jargonese of a patent requires. But currently you can just find them on my social media and my website. That's Brandon's Annulus on Facebook, and the website is just annularastro.space. But I'm sure that you could put those down into the description maybe. But thank you for asking. Do you have anything else you want to say about the course, Geoff?
Nope. I'm just looking forward to teaching it with you, Brandon. It's really amazing and exciting material. I think it's really important and critical for astrologers to learn at least the basics of astronomy and to understand the mechanics of the solar system and how things actually function and work. And it's a very difficult, thing to conceptualize, but the more we understand it and the more we can visualize the way everything works, the more we can kind of embody it as astrologers and understand it on a deeper level. So I look forward to bringing all this material to the new Kepler students that are signing up. And hopefully, if you haven't signed up yet, this piques your interest and spurs you to do so. We're starting out here talking about the contrast, the differences between astronomy and astrology. Astro, of course, the prefix means pertaining to the stars or celestial bodies or activities taking place outside the Earth's atmosphere. And the suffix nomi denotes a specific area of knowledge or the laws governing it and how does it work. It's more scientific. And logi is a subject of study or branch of knowledge and learning, more kind of pushing it towards the what does it mean and the divination and the delineation of the scientific aspects of astronomy. So we're going to be trying to bring these two together in our course, especially towards the end of the course, bringing them together and merging the more delineations with the scientific astronomy of space, if you will.
Do you both see a time where the two are married again for so long, for so many centuries they were, and then there was the breakup and the distinction between the astronomy and the astrology? What are your guys' thoughts on that particular topic?
I absolutely feel, even like in this present moment, that I am sitting in the ceremony that's taking place to re-exchange those vows and share the kiss um, and have that kind of. I definitely have that sense of the romantic of these two subjects, not necessarily uh, reuniting, maybe in the ancient sense where there wasn't a distinction, but moving through this time period of distinguishing them, where now in their re um, integration with one another, we can like keep the sense of separateness, but find even more uh, nuance and beauty in the way that they can now interact as kind of two different subjects.
Yeah, well said, Brandon. Thank you. I have a unabridged Oxford English Dictionary from 1971 that I often like to refer to for certain words because it's fascinating to see the the very detailed definitions of words. And when you look up the I'm sorry, the prefix astro in that dictionary, I won't share it here. I actually tried to put it on one of these slides, but the wording is so small you can't see anything. But it's incredible how many definitions with the prefix astro there are. And a lot of conversation sometimes about astrologer or astrologist. Um, there are so many more too. So it's fascinating to know that there are multiple, words with related to astro. And I think that, like Brandon said, um, this course in particular is unique in that, just astronomy for astrologers, there are multiple courses taught out there these days from some of the orgs, but the marriage of these two and to bringing astronomy knowledge to astrologers, it's very much harder to bring astrology knowledge to the astronomy world. It's not as well received, if you will. But looking forward to this.
I am, of course, a performer, so I hope you'll indulge me in a little musical intro. Let's start from the very beginning. A very good place to start. When we read, we begin with ABC, but astronomy begins with sun rising. Sun rising, each day begins with such a nice thing. Sun rising, sun conjunct the ascendant. Let's see if we can make this a little bit more clear. I'm going to start us off with a little roadmap so we know exactly where we are heading within this presentation. Geoff gave us a really good set of definitions with astronomy and astrology, and our hope within this hour is that we can give you a really concise and clear example of how over the course of our course, we will be starting off with the astronomy of a thing and taking us across the bridge to see how that can translate into an astrology that is really grown out of the soil of understanding. So we are going to be doing that through the topic of sunrise. We'll start with the sun itself, and then with the rising or the ascendant, with a quick little point on conjunctions, and then bring all of those topics together in a synthesis to talk about sunrise itself. And then I've prepared a little bit of a bonus activity, bringing it back from the astrology back towards a fun kind of experimental scientific method approach where we can try and recover or find data that helps us better like take it from the theory that we'll be going through and then try and bring it to a place of like actually gathering some of the real life implications in a way that could be surprising or could be reinforcing of what we discuss. So we're going to talk about the sun first, and Geoff is going to start us off.
So the astronomy of the sun, Brandon and I, first of all, we've had a lot of fun putting this together, not to mention the rest of the course. We've spent a lot of time, sometimes hours on end, getting excited and into different down rabbit holes and whatnot. But this particular course is we felt pertinent because we all understand the sunrise enough that it happens every day. It's a sacred moment, and it symbolizes the sun on the ascendant. So that's kind of where we're taking this here. But to start out with the science and the astronomy of the sun is a star, and what defines a star is when a celestial body is massive enough to fuse hydrogen into helium at its core, and that in turn creates heat and energy and light and gravity. And so within the solar system, of course, the sun represents the center of the origin of gravity, light, heat, and energy, and of course, mass. The sun makes up about almost nearly 100% of the mass in the solar system. So you can just tell from that right there that it's massive.
Mind-boggling.
Yes, mind-boggling, very hard to comprehend. And another, really important point is that the sun moves with the most consistency of any of the wandering celestial bodies in the sky, in the skies of Earth. So there's no retrograde. There's no fluctuations at all. It's very consistent, very reliable. Comes up every single morning. And when it comes up and rises, the stars fade, the sky becomes opaque, and daytime is for the rest of the day. And it appears to be about a half degree wide, but the rays of the sun extend approximately 17 degrees either side of it, also known as the beams. And so to marry these two, the astronomy of the sun, the science of the sun, and to bring it into, some more delineations of the astrology of the sun, we can consider the core or the center around which the solar system is organized. This can relate to the definition, the astrological delineation, if you will, of the sun. It's a part, like I said, that contains consistency rather than fluctuations. Like the soul, the soul is consistently there, present, shining, beautiful, despite the fluctuations going on all around us in life. The soul remains consistent. The sun produces light, which leads to sight and clarity and knowledge and truth. It is our connection to consciousness and the awakened active mind. And of course, the sun does represent often authority figures with strong gravity pulling others into its orbit, families, companies, countries, friends. And the sun often, its placement and depending upon where it is, but it really symbolizes our bright visions and our capacity to lead. And it's a definer of boundaries and domains. So, bringing, the science and the astronomy of the sun and how it is the center of our universe, of our solar system. And, all the implications, all the ways you can think of what the sun has and offers and does. It's so powerful and it's so mind-boggling, like Brandon said. So, it's of course the most prominent part of our astrological natal chart, and in all these ways I just described.
One thing I think to just like point out in the activity of this is what we're really trying to show is that when someone is giving an astrological delineation for a point, that there are many ways to try and like find the truth in it. Where did the truth of that come from? Like, what are we pulling from to actually like generate that topic as a description for that planet? And our kind of thesis with this is that at least one of the really strong foundational ways of deriving those metaphorical truths is to take the astronomical mechanics and try and translate them as clearly as possible towards kind of the other side of that line. So, going on to the other part of sunrise is the rising or the ascendant. So, the ascendant makes up part of the horizon, with the horizon being the horizontal line that every other horizontal line is itself named after. They're all a reference to the horizon that we observe, cutting the ground from the sky all around us. Specifically, the ascendant part of the horizon is that which is towards the east, which is this direction where the sky rises up from out of the ground and comes up visibly in the sky. This is mechanically due to the rotation of the Earth upon its axis, turning us in space and causing the sky to appear to move around us. So, taking those astronomical qualities, the first astrological delineation most give is that the ascendant has to do with appearance. And now we can understand why. It is the ability for something to show up because it's the place where something goes from being unseen to being seen. And therefore, it also has to do with a thing's visible qualities and even its physical form. It also has to do with first impressions. A lot of times, the like memes around your rising will have to do with um, how people perceive you upon first contact. And that's another function of this, another metaphor for you having been unseen outside of a person's awareness. And then when you move into that person's awareness and introduce yourself, your ascendant is triggered. It's the thing that's first, that's describing how you show up in that case, in that new environment. And lastly, this kind of comes together to make the ascendant related to the birth or beginning of something, with the birth being the moment where we were invisible inside the womb, but then emerge visibly manifest into the world. And this is exactly the moment that inspires us to study natal charts so deeply, and why within a natal chart the ascendant becomes the symbolic representative of the person themselves, the native, as well as the planet who rules it, and perhaps any planet located there. So I'll pass it on to Geoff for conjunctions.
Yeah, you see this beautiful picture here. Brandon, you took this, I believe it's the conjunction of Moon and Venus. So a conjunction is a geometric alignment, of course, where two things come together. And this, of course, like I said, this is a photo of the Moon conjunct Venus. So, when two things come together, it's a combination of their influence. It gets more powerful because they're working together. And usually a conjunction is considered within, a few degrees, and the orb between two celestial bodies being within a few degrees. With luminaries, of course, we can make that a little bit larger, of course. But today we're simply going to think of conjunctions functioning like plus. So, Brandon, I know that you kind of brought this in. I like this a lot. This is Moon plus Venus, Sun plus Ascendant. And this is where we're taking this here. So, Brandon, I'm going to pass this back to you again for sunrise.
Yay, wonderful. So, bringing together our sun's astronomy and astrology and combining it with the ascendants astrology and astronomy, we're going to create a kind of a synthesis and see what kind of synastry those 2 points have with each other, the ways that they are similar, especially, are going to really be the thing that drives our next set of delineations. So, sunrise is this moment each day that the sun reaches the eastern horizon and comes up into view. This rising gradually transforms the sky from black and transparent to blue and opaque, and causes all other celestial bodies besides the moon to disappear upon its arrival. This begins the daytime and occurs once daily, which seems so basic, but it really is important to realize just how ubiquitous this feature is in our reality and how much our lives are naturally built around it. This moment happens around 6 a.m. depending on the time of year and location, and of course occurs every 24 hours. And it sets off many biological and geological processes at that time. So even before there are human beings around, like through the process of evolution of life on this planet, the appearance of the sun has like put itself down into our genetic core, where there are so many processes that like begin to rev up the circadian rhythms of things that are awake and asleep, the photosynthesis of plants, like that. Its impact like can't be understated in terms of its effect that it has on our planet and the things that live on it.
Up the point. What are your guys' thoughts on, particularly on modern society, where do you think we've in some ways become disconnected from the cycles by the natural rhythms with obviously all of our artificial lights over the last 100 years, and maybe that's some of that disconnect? And do you think it ties in for the importance, I think Geoff was saying before, of astrologers reconnecting and understanding the astronomy that underpins the astrology and being reconnected in some way?
Yeah, I definitely believe that, I think it kind of goes without saying that our rhythms have definitely been disrupted, and I think the majority of us, without a doubt, have lost touch with that. This powerful rebirth every day, if you will, of the sunrise. You think about birdsong before sunrise, at twilight, the different phases of twilight that we'll talk about in our course too. And how just that song, the songs of the birds in the morning, and not to mention the crickets in the evening and the tree frogs, when the sun goes down, and it's that time of day. So these kinds of these sounds and these rhythms and these biological processes that Brandon mentioned, without a doubt, I think that we've lost touch with those natural rhythms, maybe not entirely, but quite a bit. And they entirely tie into astrology. And, I think, again, these two concepts that are sort of separate yet the same. And, bringing in the understanding of the astronomy of our solar system and the rhythms and the cycles and the great circles and how everything is functioning and working is so magical and so sacred. That it's kind of like the forest. You can't see the forest for the trees when it comes to astronomers who poo-poo astrology. It's like they're forgetting the sacredness of how powerful these cycles really are.
I think that in most senses, I totally agree. I think in particular with sunrise, it's something that's basically impossible to to get away from being influenced by. Like no matter how much that you would desacralize it, you can't stop the sense of becoming at least try like the environment trying to draw you out of sleepiness. Like
Yeah.
you can't avoid the day having started. Um, but I do think that even if it has become less um, of a like it's become more mundane to like the regular person. I think the bigger tragedy, in a sense, is the way that it has become like a point skipped over in the process of learning astrology, in a sense. There's, I think, a big disconnect in our modern practices that has come from the casting of charts with computers, where right now all we need is like a birth time and location, and like whoop, you could get all of the things that you wanted and immediately like rush into figuring out how that asteroid contributed to your bad relationship. Like you can like immediately dive off into the nuanced offshoots that are so sometimes so fun to fall down those rabbit holes. But I think that there's something lost in the taking the time to actually learn how to draw the chart and like with your own hands, having figured out where those places are, there's some kind of internal understanding that's required for casting a chart with your hands that's no longer a barrier to delineation anymore. But I think it's something that even if we're not going to go back to drawing our charts, we still have to care about knowing that information in order to be good astrologers, the people who are actually saying that they want this stuff to be sacred. We want to understand it better if we're to give it the proper respect that it deserves. Like right now, the big three is becoming like a pretty ubiquitous thing that even like the layperson knows in our culture. Like um, the sun has always been the thing in the West that people identify with, even if they don't understand it. It's the sun that's giving them that sign that they're identifying with. But at this point, sun, moon, rising is something that a lot of people know about themselves. But even though there's something very simple about sun and rising, if those 2 points were the same, that you were born near sunrise, you can even know like you had to put in your time of birth into the computer to pull that up. There's like what time it was, and still understanding that you have sun and ascendant together in the same sign made it sunrise still can be an insight, because a lot of times we haven't had like the gentle foundational under like teaching at the beginning to just really hammer it in that sun rising. So
Like,
getting back into the content, I guess.
yeah,
um
no, it's all good. Thank you, Brandon. Of course,
this
it's so powerful indeed, and this is a display of the sunrises throughout the year in the southern hemisphere. You can see at the top, January, the sun is rising very north, and by the time we get to June and July, the sun is rising further south, and then it turns back and goes back to the north again. And Brandon, if you wanted to add to this, feel free.
Yeah. Just this is just kind of a visual description of how in the last slide we said that sunrise can occur at different times depending on the time of year it is as well. And yeah, this gives us a visual that it like even though sunrise is so consistent, there are different still nuances to consider in regards to what sign it was in, and helping us to gain a better observational kind of an understanding of how this single phenomenon works. I want to kind of make a distinction between sunrise and the concept that we call dawn. So, dawn itself is the twilight that occurs when the rays or beams of the sun have risen over the horizon, but the disk of the sun is not yet present. Geoff talked about when he talked about the sun that the beams extend about 17 degrees. So here, dawn is about an 18-degree arc length. So it's showing us kind of the range of those beams. And it gives us a 6-degree separation between three phases. So as the sun gets to 18, 17 degrees under the horizon, the very, very first little rays would peak up and most of the stars would still be visible. That's astronomical dawn. Then nautical dawn occurs and like a lot of the most dim stars will already start to recede. Most of the planets will still be visible and the brightest of the stars. And then as we get to these last minutes of dawn, as the sky really starts to turn blue, sometimes only Venus and Jupiter could be up. Uh, and those like final moments as the sun rises then take us into sunrise as a particularized moment, with then the disk of the sun coming up and starting true day sect, and that kind of being the moment that we're focusing on. But this can give us a lot of, again, like ways to see into the chart and seeing, oh, like the sun was just under the ascendant. That's a different kind of a feeling in the process of the dawning than if you see the sun right over the ascendant. That, like, even within that conjunction, there are these degrees of transition that are really fascinating about this particular event. And these are just a couple of pictures kind of showing 4 minutes is about how long it takes for a single degree of the zodiac to rise over the ascendant. So these are kind of fun 4-minute increments of dawn kind of emerging that I think are really beautiful and help to really get that picture into our mind. So finally, we get to see a chart, right? So here we can see the sun. So the icon of it is the circle with a dot in the center. That's what how astrologers have iconized the sun. And the ascendant is the part of that horizontal line cutting through the chart that is proceeding to the left. So seeing that the little dash of that sun is right on that horizontal line is showing us that this is a moment of sunrise. And looking down at the exact degree itself, the sun is at 1446 and the ascendant is at 1419. So even in this moment, when you like see that dash so closely aligned to that horizon, the disk of the sun is actually still fully below it. So the sky is still probably fully opaquely blue, but the disk is still yet to even crest over. It would be probably 2 more minutes before it would actually reach and begin to like, And to give you a first little taste of the annulus, this is the annulus also set for sunrise. So with the sun facing directly to the left, this would be sun conjunct ascendant, and this one is displayed here also during the moment of sunrise with the sun pointing towards the east. And a fun feature of this is you can really see that at sunrise, the shadows are long, which is a fun extra consideration with the sun, is like thinking about how large and which direction the shadows are pointing. I just want to quickly, before we get to the astrology of sunrise, just kind of like remark on why we think of the ascendant or the rising as pointing to the left. Because especially just in like regular schooling or just like in general society, we usually are really familiar with this compass design in which the east is pointing to the right. So the reason that we think of the ascendant to the left is that in a chart, the south is usually described as up. And this is because with most astrologers living in the northern hemisphere, and most people in general living in the northern hemisphere for all of history, that just being where most of the land masses are, we look towards the south, kind of towards the equator, but really we're looking towards the ecliptic, which is the path that the sun defines through the sky and that the planets also more or less follow. So that is why we envision the chart as us standing on the ground and looking south towards the ecliptic. And in that way, we can kind of feel and envision that eastern part of the sky that's rising coming up towards our left shoulder.
So wonderfully explained, because some students that you get, it's the mind is going back to front. So you pull up a chart and you might say something along the lines of, you have a very southern hemisphere dominated chart with maybe 6 or 7 planets above the horizon. They're saying, hold on a minute, south and north. So that's a wonderful way of explaining that.
Absolutely. And it's also something to be aware of if you have Southern Hemisphere students, where a lot of these things that we maybe take for granted could really feel opposite in their practice, that they would want to, if they're like trying to interact with astrology with that more meaningful, tangible lived experience, that they might want to feel sunrise to the right. That's how they actually experience it in the sky, because they're looking towards the north in order to see the ecliptic. So we tried to be really intentional during our course that we are kind of giving that alternate side view when there are these different times in astronomy where that difference in hemisphere would be applicable to kind of feel in a difference of. And in that case, to name that upper part of the chart the southern hemisphere might be a misnomer to a student like that. And this photograph just gives us that art of the ecliptic over the course of the day, where that little dot at the near the horizon on the left side would be our sunrise, what we're talking about today. So I'll pass it over to Geoff to give us the astrology, finally the meat of what we're uh, all kind of building anticipation up for.
Yeah, so to bring all this together, we talked about the astronomy and the astrology of the sun, the astronomy and the astrology of the ascendant, the astronomy of a conjunction, and then of course bringing the sun and the ascendant together, which is a conjunction. We're talking about the astrology now of a sunrise chart, or just a sunrise in general. A native who has this is going to appear like the sun. They're going to have a bright aura, a bright countenance, perhaps taking after dad. Sometimes a description, a delineation of the sun. Highly visible, unable to hide or go unnoticed, meaning, when you walk into a room, you change the atmosphere from night to day. I think it is very common for someone who has sun on the ascendant to exhibit these traits, for sure. And they have a lot of energy. They get up early. They're hardworking. They're able to vigorously pursue their desires. Longevity, ample fuel to burn. These are all kind of more or less, if you will, typical traits of somebody with such a conjunction. And they're inspiring and they inspire others. They cause an uptick in activities for themselves and for other people. So I think that we wanted to talk about this specific phenomenon as something that we're all so familiar with. Sunrise. Everyone knows what sunrise is, but to bring the astrology of sunrise and to bring in all the elements that create the sunrise, the sun, the ascendant, the conjunctions, and to delineate this. And we're not doing a lot of delineation in our course, just so you know, but this is a good description of how what we can gain from understanding the astronomy as astrologers. So Brandon, if you'd like to take this any further, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just would build on to that and say that these like generalized descriptions, of course, have to be like taken into the context of whatever chart that you were studying, and you want to like remain open to these things not working at all to them having like been significantly changed with some kind of an aspect or the dignity of the sun, all those like additional astrological considerations that we use in the art of astrology. But this activity is like thinking of sunrise and anthromo anthropomorphizing it. What is that?
Yeah.
Um, the like personifying it into a kind of a character and then really trying to clearly predict what that character might be like by trying to pull as many of those astronomical traits in.
Mhm.
And so in regards to like remaining curious, I just put together a couple of questions that you might ask a native who you see has the sun rising. Like I think it's important to actually, instead of just like lay out, here's how you are, ask how it is you are and take some time to like first get in the feedback. So some kind of leading questions, might be, did your birth cause big changes in your family? With the sunrise being such an impactful appearance of something. What would you say is the biggest impact your dad has had on your life? With our assumption that probably the dad had a very big part in crafting the appearance and personality of this person. Especially like in that moment of birth, did the people around exclaim that, wow, he has his dad's nose? Like some kind of even that birth story. We're really talking about that moment of appearance. So like, especially in that moment, did you look like your dad? Um, do you find it difficult to remain anonymous or unnoticed when you arrive somewhere? And I think it's kind of a fun question because it could either be a blessing or a curse to have this gift for rising, like appearing like the sun. If you enjoyed that attention, or you like could like use it as a glamour for getting what you want in a kind of social situation, then it could be uh, really awesome. But if like the rest of the components of your chart say I'm actually a really private, introverted person, and this fact that I can't go anywhere without people immediately like turning towards me and acknowledging me could actually feel really kind of suppressing to what that person actually wants.
This is
Um,
my favorite question you've got there, the difficulty to remain anonymous. And I think what Geoff was talking about before, if these people walk into a room, regardless, as you're saying, Brandon, whether they enjoy that attention or not, they're going to walk into that room and you're going to know they're there. So
uh-huh.
that speaks to that. I love that question.
No, absolutely. My director of the circus that I work for, it's called La Petite Cirque. She actually has Venus Cazimi rising. So she was
Wow.
in
Oh my
Scorpio.
days.
So um when she comes into our circus, suddenly it's true. Suddenly we're all revolving around her and like like all attention has shifted to what is it that needs, like what are her priorities for what we're doing today. It all becomes around her vision and her being the center around which all of us are kind of changing our trajectories to include her perspective. Um, so quickly on some others, because I do want to get to our last activity. Do you often get the sense that other people are orbiting around you, which I think is another fun one? And do these qualities dissipate when you've been somewhere for a while? Because we're really talking about what occurs at the appearance of the thing. And so I think that it might be interesting that if like noticing if these different features kind of wane as a person settles into the space that they're in and like other aspects of their chart come out instead of just that potent moment of entering, you know. So for our very last activity, I wanted to kind of try and bring all of this back into a more scientific realm by taking us kind of through the scientific method and giving us a little bit of an activity of how we might re-engage um, this material through a way that can actually give us some more tangible information. The generalized framework for the scientific method is first to ask a question. Second, to form a hypothesis about that question, which is a testable explanation or a reasonable prediction. Third is to gather data through experimentation. Fourth is to analyze those results. And then fifth is to reevaluate your hypothesis through the lens of that extra material that you've gained through your experiment and see whether or not your hypothesis was supported or contradicted, not necessarily proven, but whether, what you thought kind of happened and whether you can replicate that same experiment. So really what we've been doing through this whole activity of the presentation is kind of questions 1 and 2, or steps 1 and 2. We've asked the question, how might a sunrise birth affect a person? Implicitly, we've been asking that. And second, we used the astronomy to kind of create some hypotheses, some reasonable predictions for what sunrise might do, like giving people a bright countenance, a high vitality, or an inspiring persona through trying to derive it from the astronomy. And so now what we can do as a little bit of an experiment to gather data is an astrological survey. So my survey that I did as I was kind of going through this process was to find a database of birth charts. I just went to astro.com because I really went because of the feature that I'll show you that you can search by aspect. Um, so I just use the celebrity charts there. There are plenty of different kinds of databases around, and we can really use them to try and pull some of this data from.
I'm sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt. Everything froze on my end. Can you just start from the top of that bit? I apologize. I don't know what happened there. Right here. Yeah, it just stopped. My apologies.
No, don't worry. Well, so through our astrological survey, I'm going to go through some celebrity charts from astro.coms to show you like an example of how I went through this process as I was doing my study of sunrise. And I just want to make 2 points. First, to be aware that in these kinds of databases, we're using celebrity charts, so the sample is already skewed towards people who have some kind of notoriety, um, which is something to just like be aware of in your brain. Like all these people are already famous enough to be included in this database, and that can kind of shift the results. And I think fame itself could be an indication from sunrise because these people are very bright. They kind of change the atmosphere. They can have things orbiting around them and be at the center of a kind of a structure, like we could reasonably assume that fame might be an indicator, but we don't want to overemphasize that in a sample of famous people. So I'm gonna jump to astrocharts.com. Do you have a thought on this process, Geoff? I'm only gonna give one. Oops, I'm only gonna give one.
No, I mean, I think that
example.
you're prefacing this is important because, of course, famous people, they're not all going to have sun on the ascendant, but to have sun on the ascendant can certainly kind of give that natural countenance that someone is a little more well known than others. Like we've been talking about, like our hypotheses has kind of put forth. And so we'll see that here in some of these examples, or I guess you'll use one of them. But Brandon and I went through this together, and he showed me, he found a number of people. And of course, I think we all know a handful of people who have sun on the ascendant or in the 12th house. And I do know after years of study that, politicians often have sun in the 12th or sun close to the ascendant, and they're very well known and people, on the public stage, if you will. But go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, and I think it's good to emphasize that one of the reasons to even really put a lot of emphasis on this is because sunrise occurs every day. Potentially every single person you encounter could have a sunrise chart. Like it's just so kind of ubiquitous in the cycles of life that understanding this could actually help you with a lot of different readings because it could pop up potentially so many times. So here on astrocharts.com, I come to celebrity charts and I'm going to go to by aspect. This is such a cool feature because here I can put in sun, conjunction, rising or ascendant, and then I can get all of the charts that have sunrises, which is so cool that you can do that with any aspect.
That's awesome.
One thing to consider right here at the top is that sunrise has a particular kind of bug to it where if a celebrity's birth time is not known, sunrise is often put as the default. So what we want to do first when we click on one of these is look at the birth time accuracy, and you can see with Scarlett Johansson, it's poor. So we don't want to use this in our set because this was probably just an estimated time of birth, right? And we can kind of see that if it's really round, if it's just 7 a.m., 6:30 a.m., then we can assume uh we can kind of preface that it might be an estimated birth time, and we really do want to look. So the one that I want to go to is Andie MacDowell here on the second row in the center. And she has even though at 6 a.m., it says that it's excellent. And you can see that her sun was right at 0 degrees of Taurus, and the ascendant is at 3. So it has that 3-degree orb. You might consider it to be in the 12th, but working with whole sign, I would consider it in the first, and I think any astrologer would consider it conjunct. And it's in the sign of Taurus. Interestingly, it's also across from the node, so she was born right after a solar eclipse, but that's a topic for our class. Come to class if you want to talk about solar eclipses. But so she is really well known for like where did it? Oh, it just says American model and actress, but she's really well known for being the female lead in Groundhog Day. Um, and so what I did when I found a chart that I wanted to study was I would just go to YouTube, and then I would type in their name. And the thing about it being sunrise is that um, we're trying to look for the appearance. So we really would be trying to look for the very first way in which this person appears to us and like try and use that as the biggest point. Like, I think that's an interesting consideration. We're really trying to look for the very first thing to come up into our view. And so when we do that with Andie MacDowell, what comes up first is this interview that she did with Jimmy Fallon, and I just want to play a really short clip from it, if I may.
One of the most interesting stories, I'm a rule follower. Like I follow all the rules. No, I don't break rules. I listen, like that I show up. I'm always on time. I'm never late. And we were in the
So she goes on to tell a story about her time in Groundhog Day, but I really want to emphasize that thing that she just said. She said, "I am a rule follower. I am always on time, and I am never late." And appearing on time, I think, is such a fascinating consideration that I wouldn't have necessarily just like deduced from sunrise that you appear on time. It's a consistent appearance. And I think especially with her sun being at 0, like her sun was on the ingress too, and had just barely appeared. And like I thought that was such a fun expression maybe that we could start to jot down amongst our data, of things that we could take into other charts and with clients and just like ask, are you somebody who is on time a lot, um, with her as well. This video is of her appearance on SNL and her monologue, which is when she first comes out and gives her solo kind of a set. And during these 3 minutes, what she does is she talks about her dad. She talks about how he's kind of a prude. And she talks directly through the camera to her father. And she says, Daddy, when we get to timestamp 11 minutes and 10 seconds, you can go and get a refreshment. She like goes through the whole show and is like, at any time where there's going to be kind of a more risque part, she tells her dad to go make himself a sandwich, go take a bathroom break here. It's so funny. And I think that moment when she's appearing and she's talking to her dad and she's talking about the time, I think it all really came together to show how in her particular case, this sunrise chart is really manifesting.
Charts example in fixed Earth, no less. That's just a great
yes, absolutely. Yes, in Taurus, yeah, being even more like emphasizing that consistency of it.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Definitely.
And the practicality.
Maybe. Reliable. And I just want to say that, Brandon and I, he looked at a couple of other charts, Sarah Silverman, and, very similar kind of experiences when we found some of these videos of these other celebrities and just the kind of words that were spoken in their interviews that came up or their first videos that came up, just kind of a lottery, kind of almost a divination, if you will, an oracle of looking up some of these different celebrities. So
yeah, here, and her very most popular first coming up video on YouTube is Sarah Silverman's dad taught her the most tasteless jokes. Yeah. And her sunrise is in Sagittarius. I think it was really fun to go through these.
Yeah. So again, another father, mention in just two of these celebrities. So anyway, fascinating, very cool marriages, if you will, of the astronomy and the astrology of sunrise charts.
Full examples. And I like how you've also dived into the quality of data because, of course, the angles moving so quickly, having quality data, AA if possible, that just to really, if you've got poor data or dirty data, then you're in dodgy territory.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and of course, like we mentioned, celebrities are known for being known.
Right.
So to have a sunrise chart for a celebrity is perhaps even more telling of their how known they are, or their specific...
or maybe it actually might be a good just like guess to make. You just guess maybe that a famous person has an angular sun. Like it actually might be a pretty educated guess to make, in terms of if you have to choose any time.
Yeah.
And I think Geoff, mentioned before politicians. Now, I don't know the quality of data, but I believe is Abraham Lincoln that has sun on the ascendant, sun rising. And I'd have to double check that, but it's quite interesting you being politicians because that would make sense as well.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about Abraham Lincoln. I'd have to check that too. It wouldn't surprise me.
Can you see my screen again, just to make sure?
Yes.
Or we're on the slideshow.
Yep.
Okay. I know we're running towards the end, so.
Yeah. So, Brandon, you want me to list these topics here that we're going to cover?
Yeah.
So our course is as comprehensive as we can make it. It is a basic astronomy course, but we definitely are pretty thorough and we go into some pretty exciting territories. The topics that we're going to cover in the course include observational stargazing techniques. So we're really going to help students get outside, look at the stars, find the stars by referencing them from other stars or from other planets in the sky. Of course, understanding the astronomy of the sun, moon, and the planets, including, the cycles within them. And with the moon, of course, we're going to talk about nodes and eclipses and the different types of months, anomalistic, draconic, etc. Brandon is going to bring in a lot of fixed stars, a handful of fixed stars, asterisms, and constellations, which is a very important and very exciting field of study that I am less familiar with. Brandon is much more familiar with, so that's exciting. And of course, we're going to talk about the astronomy and the philosophies of signs, mansions, and houses, and house systems, great circles and coordinate systems. Of course, we have to understand the how these great circles interact and work, and the different types of coordinate systems and what they're based on, the different great circles that they're rooted in, and the nomenclature therein. Unseen and deep space objects, so black holes, comets, and of course, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and beyond the Kuiper Belt. Important historical figures. We're going to talk some history, not too in depth. Kepler has its own astrological history course, of course, but and then how to build an astrology from astronomy. So a lot of what we've just been talking about today, bringing in the astrology to the astronomy, and bringing the astronomy into the astrology and marrying them. And of course, we're world building thought experimentation. Brandon, I'd like you to kind of.
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of like our bonus topic. It'll be the topic of the very last class that also has our practicum. But I think that like a fun way to really try and utilize all this information in a way that's not like directly astrological is to imagine like if you were to have made astrology from the planet Mars, how would it be different? Like trying to situate yourself in another environment, kind of like see the cycles from that point of view, and how would kind of these systems be different based on that alternate perspective, Martian centric. And this can be cool too in terms of if you are story building for like a novel, like really trying to get rich astrological information into your world can help you derive that world's magical systems, its mythologies, its mechanics of its times of year. You can really try and like I think that there's a lot of cutting edge things to do with like if you're building like a Dungeons and Dragons environment, or you're like trying to write a fantasy novel, that like a lot of these concepts actually can be really, really interestingly utilized in a fictional landscape to make it feel more real once you understand them.
Yeah, and I'd want to just also throw in that last year at NORWAC, Sam Reynolds gave the final speech of the conference, I believe, and well, I was there for it. I just don't remember if it was the absolute last talk or not, but he talked about astrology from Mars, Martian centric astrology, and what that might look like in the future, whether it's possible or not, and so on and so forth. But so when Brandon brought this topic into just to kind of touch upon on our last class that we're going to have, I brought up Sam's talk, which was a very fascinating talk. So it's a good experimental kind of perspective, and good to conceptualize your mind, bring your mind and try to expand it even further into a concept that seems even more difficult to imagine than Earth-centric, geocentric, but a good exercise for the mind. So the course schedule is going to be 10 classes, 2 hours apiece, every Sunday from 11 to 1 Pacific, 2 to 4 Eastern. The slides will be uploaded Friday evenings for a preview study, and the classes are live. Recordings will be available and uploaded by Tuesday. We ask that students come to as many live classes as possible. You don't have to, but it is really a lot more helpful to be present with everyone for them. There will be no classes for most of April 6, 13, and 20. We'll resume on the 27th. And the final exam will take place during the final class on June 8th. There will be another break at the end of May for those who are attending NORWAC, including myself. So there's the course laid out in its basics. It's the logistics, if you will. Is there another slide there, Brandon? I don't remember.
Yes, I'm just gonna end off by restating that a lot of our focus is going to be on the observational. So we really are going to emphasize the actual techniques for going out and experiencing these things for yourself. And in regards to stargazing and the sun, usually we're taught, do not look at it, But in a lot of cultures, there is actually a historical ritualistic practice of stargazing, and that occurs right after sunrise and right before sunset, during those first few moments that the sun is over the horizon, is when it is perhaps the safest to look at it with your own eyes. But in any case, you can look at the sun all the time if you get a pair of eclipse glasses. Then you can observe it a little bit more safely by using some protection.
Photo.
Yeah. And I want to also throw in here that we're going to require the students create a field journal. And so, like Brandon was saying, this is a very observational course, so we're going to really emphasize the need to go outside and look at the stars and look at the planets and look at the ecliptic and see what's going on and pay attention to it, look at the moon, and take notes and actually keep a journal of what's going on and what you're observing and sharing some of those notes with the rest of the class. So we're hoping that the students are open to engaging with one another and with us. And, part of the requirement is that the field journals are exercised, that you actually, do participate in that activity of creating and maintaining a field journal.
To me, honestly, it is like the most important takeaway that a student would get from this class is building a relationship with a true sky where they feel comfortable going out and under it and feeling like they can navigate what's going on up there. And if we can facilitate the ability to then like take those things and draw it down into a metaphysical framework, perhaps, then that would be kind of a bonus. But we really just want to promote people having a relationship with the sky and feeling like they have an understanding of what exactly is going on up there.
An exciting class. I need to get in there myself.
Oh, thanks, Callum. Yeah, no, we'd love to have you.
Yes.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you both so much, Geoff, Brandon, for a brilliant presentation and just eloquently how you both speak on the topic. And I love how you're just reiterating the importance of astrologers understanding the astronomy. And I think this is such an important class for the community. I know we've got classes in other areas, but this sounds like a really interactive place where, and that's another thing about KeplerCollege, that sense of community where bouncing ideas off one another and that sense of pulling together. Absolutely wonderful. So for everybody watching, just to reiterate, I put the links below in the description and the comment boxes, the links to the classes. And if you guys can email me all your socials and whatnot, I'll pop all of those in there as well for everyone to check out.
Thank you so much, Callum. It's been so great to talk with you.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Thank you, Callum.
I'd love to have you on again. And thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys later.
Okay. Cheers, mate. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.